Oh, by the way, can we get nerdy Crockett more often? Because let me tell you, I was tempted to just put that shit on pause and like be done with the episode.
He had it all too.
I didn't know that it was him at first, but so my notes are like, who the hell's the hot nerd by the pool doing his taxes by the pool? And then I'm like, oh my god, it's Crockett. It's fucking Crockett.
Hello and welcome to Go With The Heat. I'm Dominic.
And I'm John.
And I'm Jenna.
This is your cultural guide to the phenomenon that was Miami Vice. This week, we are talking about Season 1, Episode 14, titled Golden Triangle, aka Score. It's the first part of a two-part episode, which is starts off fantastic. It originally premiered on January 11th, 1985. It's directed by George Stanford Brown, who we may already know, or you may remember, was the director of the Great McCarthy episode.
Ooh, good episode.
Yeah, and the writer is Joseph Gunn, who this is his only episode that he wrote. So that's interesting because the second half is going to be written by a different writer.
Yeah, that's weird.
Before we get started, let's check in and see what's going on in each other's lives. John, I heard you got a story for us.
Yeah, so my ice maker on my fridge is broken, and it has been for about the last 2 months.
Which is pretty crappy for the time of year. Kind of hot everywhere.
Being summer, you know, and I like ice water, and for the last 2 months, it's been broken, and I just haven't gotten around to fixing it. And it literally would only take about a 30-cent fitting, or I could also buy ice trays, which I do not have. So rather than go out and buy ice trays or that fitting, I have been filling large Ziploc baggies full of water and freezing them, and then banging on them with a rubber mallet. And I've done this multiple times.
I love that your solution is like, because there's probably numerous ways that you could make ice without having to beat it with a hammer. But you're like, what if I just got some shit and I busted the fuck out of it with a hammer?
Rather than take 5 minutes and go to the store and spend the 35 cents, I'm living like a savage and breaking ice with a hammer. So that I may have ice water. So that is what is currently happening in my household.
I just imagine that when you take the bag out of the freezer, you put it on the counter, you're like, oh, and you start banging on it. Oh.
Just try and bite
it scares the hell out of the dog.
Work.
The dog just looks at me like I'm insane.
Well, I'm sure your neighbors watching you through the window are probably assuming that already too. As ice goes flying
at this
over
point,
your head,
I don't think my neighbors are very surprised.
Well, as I mentioned, this is Season 1, Episode 14, because the pilot is two parts for us, titled Golden Triangle. This was a great episode. I know I was pretty negative last week about the episode. This one is great. We have a ton of twists and turns, so it might take us a while to run through this episode, so let's hurry up and get started on the rundown. All right, so we have another strong open, but this is a strong open in a different way, unlike the other weeks where it's high tension or something like that. This one's got a little bit of tension, but it's more on the comical side of an open. We start off at a high-end hotel. Tubbs and Croc are downstairs, and they go running upstairs, and upstairs they go to the elevator. They tell the people at the elevator, like, hotel security, and they just push their way on, and they go upstairs, and upstairs, there's a man with a woman. He's got her by the back of the neck, and he's yelling in the hallway, throwing her around while she screams for help. And as Jenna alluded, he is very upset about something revolving around cakes.
I have been known to get a little touchy around cake as well, so I feel for this guy a bit. I mean, I'm not throwing people around about it, but, maybe she ate his cake.
Just to clarify, this guy's in his pajama bottoms, no shirt, and the woman he's shaking around is in a nightie, and he's accusing her of something with pancakes. And cupcakes is what we are getting out of this.
Yeah,
very upset about pancakes.
But in fairness, she is also very angry. So by the time they pull her off of him and try to lead her out, she escapes Tubbs' grasp and jumps back over to start beating on the guy. And they have to restrain her again.
Because Crockett, he comes in and he slowly, smoothly just talks down this guy. He gets him to stop being angry. A very Cheech and Chong moment where he's like,
we could get some cake.
I have a theory about why he's so upset about pancakes, though. I have a theory. She made him pancakes, but she let them sit too long, and so they soaked up too much of the syrup. and they got all mushy. Because pancakes are only good when they're still hot. You just put the syrup on them. When they sit too long, they get all mushy. And then I'd beat her up too for that. I mean, you can't wait for the pancakes.
Oh, that's so not her fault if he took too long and the syrup soaked in.
Well, that would be proper syrup etiquette.
Well, after Crockett, so like you're saying, Crockett slowly talks the guy down. He calms down and he goes to slowly put the handcuffs on him. And then the woman comes running back over, like when she sees that he's going to get arrested, and she starts fighting with him, and it causes this guy to fly off again, and it leads to more wrestling. And Crockett yells at Tubbs, like, "Get her out of here!" And right before then, too, Tubbs is telling there's other people who are, I guess, at the hotel, and he says one of my favorite lines from the episode. He tells them, "Go back to your rooms. He just ate some bad chowder."
What?
Yeah.
Also, is now the right time to approach the fact that Tubbs is in like absolutely ridiculous sunglasses throughout this entire altercation?
See, I disagree with you here. He looks amazing.
No, they're like yellow. Like, have you seen those ones?
They're
like
indoor
new,
sunglasses.
They're like new, made for TV, like selling. What are those called? Infomercial sunglasses where it's like see in HD, and they sell like those yellow tinted sunglasses that help you do that. That's what it looks like he's wearing.
Those are polarized sunglasses. He's wearing like what are called indoor sunglasses, because he's wearing that cream suit with the white shirt and those great sunglasses. He looks great.
No,
it is not just this scene either. The glasses game in general throughout this entire episode is just off the chain. It is just full of glasses that you would expect to see in some OTB betting parlor full of old guys smoking cigars,
Yeah, like they're playing high stakes blackjack in a seedy Las Vegas hotel, right? Yeah, well,
the glasses game is just insane.
The wrestling continues in the hallway. Crockett tells Tubbs, "Get her out of here." And then we jump to the lobby. The elevator opens and all of them come spilling out into the lobby, knocking the people over who are in front of the elevator. So somehow, even after all the wrestling, they decide to get in the same elevator together.
That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, did Tubbs get in the elevator with the chick and then Crockett got in as well? Or like, were they fighting and just stumbled into the elevator?
I don't know. And it doesn't make any sense other than for some sort of comic relief.
I will say that unrelated to this, but at one point I was trying to get off a ski lift and knocked over a bunch of people, and it looked very similar to them getting out of that elevator where they knocked everybody over. So, no, just not good. Poor form.
After they finally, they get the girl, I don't know where she goes, but Tubbs and Crockett get the guy out to the front of the hotel, and they handcuff him around some hand railings out just outside the front door. And they allude to like that they're working security at this hotel. That is their undercover gig that's going on right now. This is kind of important because this opening has absolutely nothing to do with where this episode ends.
Oh, nothing.
Yes.
Nothing at all.
Yeah. The PCP guy never comes back into the picture. Like,
though I think we can all agree.
Not even remotely.
Strong open, even though it had nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah, it's totally
at this point, you kind of think the episode is going in the direction that they're looking for a drug outbreak in the hotel. But very quickly, in the next few scenes, we learn that is completely not what they are looking for. That just happened to be something that happened on a Tuesday.
Yeah, and that's just like the byproduct of them having to be this hotel's security. When we come back from the credits, they're like walking through a park, and at the other end of the park, there's like a bar. It serves coffee and bar.
Are they drinking
So they're meeting
water,
the lieutenant at a cabana bar.
Shots?
It's a cabana bar. I mean, I think that qualifies as Tiki Lounge.
But they're not at the hotel. They're off-site, right? And they're in like the Cuban district of Miami.
Yeah, like I thought that maybe they were abroad. Like I thought that maybe they were like in some part of like Cabo or over the border or something. Like it doesn't look like they're still anywhere near the same location.
I'm starting to think, though, that Crockett is moonlighting in order to support his expensive lifestyle because he plays a lot of different people in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
He's hotel security. He's then a guest. Then he works in the bank vault in the hotel. He's pretty busy. Maybe he works at this bar part-time.
Well, the only reason why they're there is because they're going to talk to Castillo. And Castillo, we're going to get the gist of why they're working as hotel security. What they're looking for is 2 dirty police officers who are running they're kind of a prostitution ring, and then also some embezzlement and other crimes that they're running out of this hotel, essentially, as pimps, working girls who are in this hotel.
Do cops not know each other? Do cops not meet detectives or anything?
If Law and Order has taught me anything, it's that SVU knows the people who work homicide and drug. So no, they should absolutely know who these people are.
Yeah, they should have been in a meeting at one point or another together.
Though, in fairness, as far as this, as Miami Vice goes, I almost said Miami Connection. As far as Miami Vice goes, they haven't shown that they have any meetings that are across department, or that they ever, aside from talking to fringe people, where they'll meet someone on the homicide. Just by in passing.
They run the Vice Squad out of an office above a Radio Shack, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
The point of this scene is we get the sense that Castillo is taking this very personal, that there's 2 dirty police officers who are running blackmail, extortion, and prostitution while being police officers and using their position of power to do this. But then, because he says he just doesn't want their badges, he wants to take them down. The duo, Tubbs and Crockett, they really want out of it, but Castillo just tells them tough shit. So we go back to the hotel, and this is a great scene. There's a woman. Favorite. Yeah, there's a woman walking, and her name ends up being Candy, who's one of my favorite side characters now in an episode of Miami Vice. There's a song playing. It's Dolly Parton, a cover song of Great Balls of Fire, as she's walking around the pool. You spy in the distance. There's a man in a yellow shirt sitting, working on paperwork at the other end of the pool, and so does Candy. So she starts walking that way. As we get closer, we realize it's someone out of what looks like Revenge of the Nerds that's sitting there doing work, and Candy, who we very quickly learn is a prostitute, sets her eyes on him and knows that that's my John, that's how I'm going to get paid. As she gets closer, we see the nerd. It is Crockett, dressed as a nerd, working on the side of the pool.
So good. I didn't realize that it was Crockett at first. I will say that, he could have duped me on this one, so... But he looks adorable with those gigantic glasses eating up his entire face. And this pocket protector.
How is he undercover as a cat at the same hotel? He's undercover as a security guard while also being undercover as a pimp.
He's wearing glasses. God, he doesn't completely different person. His whole look, his hair is so not Crockett hair.
It's the Superman theory. Once I put these glasses on, no one will recognize me.
Well, he's got the whole getup. He's got a pocket protector. He's got the big glasses. He's wearing his shirt buttoned up all the way to his neck. And he's got a calculator watch.
I am so here for this look.
Speaking of which, I have a comment about Zwitek's watch later in the episode.
I always have a comment about Zwitek's pants and how they don't seem to fit him. They must sew them on when he puts them on.
I would say that Zito's pants were the more distracting ones in this episode. He's wearing those sailing ship pants.
Well, anyway. Briefly in this scene, what happens is Candy comes up to talk to Crockett. Crockett plays dumb for a few minutes. She asks to see his room key. He shows her the badge finally. They go from there back to the precinct, and Castillo, Tubbs, and Crockett are all talking to Candy. Candy's confused because she's like, hey, if you just picked me up for prostitution, how come I'm not in front of a judge? Just how come I'm here with you guys? You guys must want something else.
So what I love about this scene is all 3 of them are in the interview room because it takes all 3 of them to interview her. They were all fighting over the opportunity. And then they are all standing there casually looking at manila folders, almost fake whistling at the beginning of the scene. And
I forgot to mention that earlier when they were in the park and then they go to that cafe/bar thing and they talk to Castillo. Crockett mentions that they need to look at this from a different perspective. They've been working as security guards at the hotel. It's not really getting them to where they want to go. So Candy is a part of this. When they pick her up and bring her back to the precinct, they're trying to convince her to be like an undercover agent for them, to wear a wire and then go talk to Ross, the two dirty police officers who Candy mentions in the scene. They made a threat to her, like she needs to start paying them to be able to work that hotel.
So the one thing too I love about this is that by the end of this scene, they recruit her, go undercover with them, and then they bringing Trudy, female Crockett and Tubbs, in on this prostitution sting. And it makes me think, left two things on me. One, apparently you need a real prostitute in order to run a proper prostitution ring. And two, it seems that the female Crockett and Tubbs are only allowed to play hookers.
Yeah, it's pretty much the only role that they ever play when they go undercover. Either that or junkies, right? They're either hookers or junkies.
Yeah.
Or junkie hookers.
Hookers or junkies. Yeah. They can't be drug dealers, apparently. Apparently, back in the 80s, there were no women drug dealers.
So this is Crockett's plan. His plan is that they're going to get a real prostitute that works the hotel, which I guess is important because the people have seen her around in there. So his plan is to get her. She's going to talk to these dirty cops, and then they'll be able to bring them down with audio evidence saying, with them admitting to her basically by threatening her that they need to pay, that she needs to pay them. Castillo ultimately agrees, which is another sign here that Castillo is deeply involved in this case. Rarely do we see him actually involved in anything other than just a comment here, a comment there. Maybe he shows up at a crime scene, but he's really involved in this case. We jump back.
Usually he's just speaking with his eyes.
Oh, there's lots of that in this episode too. We jump back to the hotel, and Crockett he's still working as security. So you're right, Sean. Like, he's undercover as a pimp and as security at the hotel. And by picking up Candy and having Gina and Trudy work as prostitutes at the hotel, he's now, he's basically a pimp. Him and Tubbs have turned themselves into pimps for the undercover operation here.
Oh yeah, they're very enterprising. And the only disappointment is in the next scene where Tubbs is pretending to be a pimp with Trudy and Gina, is that Tubbs doesn't have a big hat on. He needs a pimp hat to go with his suit. I think I think that would complete everything. With the glasses, he's just missing a hat.
Well, and a cane, right? Wouldn't he need like a nice walking cane?
Good point.
And this scene is important though, so this hotel is so high end. They have like security lock boxes inside of the hotel. Now, it's hard to tell if it's like maybe a bank has these set up there, or it seems to me like what these lock boxes are is because they have such high-end clientele that stay there. They have very high valuables locked in these lock boxes.
Well, and thank goodness that they've painted safety deposit vault on every possible wall as you're walking around there, because otherwise someone might not know that they're in the safety deposit vault.
Just to make sure you know.
No getting lost in there.
So a man comes in and he asks like he wants to set up a security vault, and Crockett's like, here's your paperwork, you got to fill this out. He's like, no, I want to see it right now. And you would think that Crockett's little, detective mind would pick up on what's going on here. And I think he does, but this comes out of nowhere for the viewers. We have been paying attention to prostitution by dirty police officers and blackmail inside of this high-end hotel. We all of a sudden get this scene
Don't forget the guy high on PCP.
Yeah. So we're running. This is drugs and prostitution out of this hotel. Now we have this scene that's very clearly indicating that there's a man that is interested in doing a heist on the security lock boxes inside of this hotel. He wants to go in and see what the setup is before he signs up for one. And then he asks them what their hours are so he can know when no one is there.
And I love the security guard kind of just dumbly standing there. By the way, who looks an awful lot like Lou Ferrigno.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, it's the Incredible Hulk that's watching the vault.
Well, I guess you would want to do that. That's why you do the investigation, right? Is to make sure someone's not going to pummel you like a silverback gorilla as soon as you go in there.
But how does he think that this is not going to come off completely obvious? I would just love to see what the details are on all the boxes. What kind of security system do you have there? What are your hours? Like, that's so shady. How do you think that nobody's going to pick up on that?
What's fantastic is this isn't the only time in the episode that this guy tours this vault. Right. It's like a revolving door in there.
The next scene is just as curious as this last one, where we get introduced to this totally new storyline that's happening inside of this episode. We go poolside this time, and this is what you were mentioning about Tubbs, and we mentioned before about them being pimps now. We go poolside, there's Tubbs talking to a man, and Candy, Gina, and Trudy are all laying out in their bathing suits next to the pool, and Tubbs is setting up a John to pick a prostitute. He eventually chooses Gina, and they start heading upstairs, and it's very uncomfortable, right? Because Gina walks up to Tubbs walks up there and says, like, all right, get upstairs and make it fast. And she's like, all right, daddy. And she gets up and starts walking with the guy. And then Candy mentions, like, and it's not pretend this time. It's very uncomfortable to think of them that way.
Clearly chooses Gina because he knows she'll go all the way.
There isn't a history of that or anything.
Low blow.
So she leaves with him, and the guy who came and cased the vault is there sitting poolside as well, just on the opposite end of the pool. And he elbows the guy that's next to him, who ends up being from Thailand, right? Elbows him, and this guy never speaks throughout the entire episode. He elbows him, like, hey, check it out. They watch the exchange go down, and then he turns to him. Sarbo is the guy's name who cased the vault. He tells his friend, like, hotel security's working girls at this hotel too. So you can see the wheels spinning in their head, like they might have an opportunity as this as an in because there's people at the hotel who are already corrupt.
Yeah, and once again, it goes back to apparently cops don't know each other very well.
And that night, leaving from the hotel, this is when we have our setup on how they're going to bring down these dirty cops. Candy's leaving. She walks out front. She's apparently there often enough that she can get valet to bring her car back up to the front of the hotel. She gets in her car, and you can see that the two cops, as we've seen in pictures earlier in the episode, they're waiting in their car out in front. Their squad car, not a regular car. They're waiting in their squad car out in front. As Candy leaves, they start following Candy, and Tubbs and Crockett are also watching because this is when Candy's wearing the wire, so they follow the dirty cops and Candy. The dirty cops are a little bit down the road, flip their lights on and pull Candy over. She pulls into an alley. They walk up to the car and they just aggressively rip her out of the car and start telling her, like, you need to tell your pimps, Tubbs and Crockett, that they need to start paying us $500 a week for you to be working at this hotel. Crockett and Tubbs are listening to it on the headphones.
Yeah, and they pretty much let it go. They kind of sort of let her get her ass kicked.
Yeah, well, Crockett wants to run out earlier, but Tubbs is like, no, wait. And then you see how far away when they finally hear what they need to hear, and then they say that they're going to beat her up. They're like, no, not in the face. Then she won't be able to work. So you hear, like, okay, they're going to start beating her up, and they get out of the car to go run and help her. And you realize, like, they're like 4 blocks away.
Do you think if they hit her in the face, if they would have moved faster?
Can I just ask, like, why everyone associated, like, obviously not the main people, but, like, why everybody else has, like, Jersey accents?
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. like there are accents that don't, at least accents that don't match South Beach.
Right. Like Candy and then Ross and Garcia, that whole interaction just felt like all of a sudden we were actually up in Jersey. It was weird.
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't pay attention to that. But at the end of this scene, Tubbs and Crockett have what they need. Candy's deal was that she was going to wear the wire as long as all of her pending charges against her when she had been arrested before are dropped. She's been beat up a little bit, like just been punched in the stomach a couple times. She says, like, this is it. Candy is done. They've got what they needed. They can bring down these cops. And I was kind of sad at this point because I love Candy. I like her personality. She's good for Crockett, but she comes roaring back later in the episode. We jump to the next morning at Crockett's boat. And I have a question. Is Elvis dead?
I was wondering that, like, I don't know. It's just gotten kind of weird. Like every scene with him is just a little strange.
Yeah, Elvis is just laying there, not moving.
And Crockett's giving him a pedicure at this time. But even before that, dude, Crockett has terrible phone etiquette. He's always yelling on the phone. I can't stand when I'm talking to someone on the phone and they just start yelling into the receiver.
Well, in this scenario, he's justified, right? Because he's finding out from the precinct that both of the cops have been released by the DA. There's not, at this time, they're not pressing any charges against them. So all that
doesn't mean he has to be a dickhead to the person who's passing along the news.
I know. I mean, Crockett's a passionate guy, right? But he calms down pretty quickly and he's like, oh, hey, pal, your nails are getting kind of long. And he sits down next to Elvis and starts filing down his nails with, like, not a nail file, with like a grinding, like it would fit onto a drill type file.
It's fucking weird.
And this is this is when we are approached. What is his name?
Zarbo.
Who just happens to know where Crockett lives.
Yeah, that's really strange too. Like, they must have been tailing him, right? Because Zarbo and his Thai friend come walking up, who still doesn't, we don't ever learn his name. He never talks. He's just always there with Zarbo. Comes walking up and tells him like he's willing to work a deal with them, but he's not going to tell them right then. It's going to be later.
Thank God he didn't walk up like 30 seconds sooner, or he would have heard them on the phone talking about those dirty cops.
Yeah, it's funny how that works out, huh? When Crockett just yells at the top of his voice about about all his police work being ruined, and no one ever hears that.
It's also not surprising that they are not surprised by the alligator on the boat or the man giving the alligator the pedicure.
Well, we have a brief scene where we jump back to the precinct and Castillo is telling them about Albert Zarbo.
Hold on. One last thing. That scene is where Crockett says my favorite line of the episode. He says, "What are you writing a book?" And Zarbo goes, "Yeah." And then Crockett says, "Then kiss me and make it a love story."
What? I totally
That is
missed
a direct quote. That is my favorite quote of the episode right there. So things are getting steamy between Zarbo and Crockett.
Well, we jump to there's a very short scene at the precinct where Castillo is just showing them the information on Albert Zarbo, who's been arrested for nearly every crime out there except for burglary. So they're a little skeptical, and that's what his ultimate goal is theft at this hotel. We jump back to the hotel that night. Crockett is working security on the floor of the hotel, and he sees Candy back working the floor of the hotel doing her thing too. He comes up and pulls her away from the John that she's talking to, and she's working hard to try and get this guy, and Crockett's telling her to take off, and Candy's like, "You ain't telling me nothing, because I know you're not actually hotel security, that you're a cop. So why don't you get your hands off me and let me do my job?"
I love it. Blackmail goes both ways.
Yeah, she's got him. Like, there's nothing that he can do about this. While he's talking to her, Zarbo shows up, and he's super into Candy. He's looking her up and down. He's ready to, and that's how it ends. Like, he ends up putting a couple hundreds into Crockett's front pocket and takes her upstairs, which technically means that Crockett is actually a professional pimp now. He just pimped out Candy.
Unlike Cheetah, Candy's probably going to go through with it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Zarbo is not disappointed when he leaves that hotel room, or else the episode would go in a very different direction.
Yes. Well, Candy goes upstairs with Zarbo. Crockett goes downstairs to go cry into his milk with Tubbs about how mad Candy is making him by her sticking around. Again, another scenario where Crockett is just yelling in a room about something that should be undercover. Candy comes walking in, surprises both of them, and says that she just got done with being with Zarbo, and tosses Tubbs Zarbo's car keys and said that, "I figured you guys would be interested in this. We can work together tit for tat." I can only imagine if Zarbo decided to walk in at that point, or Ross, or any other people that they're investigating during this active investigation at this hotel. But instead, Crockett is throwing caution to the wind, just yelling for anyone to hear his complaints about how the case is going so far.
Right.
Yeah, and when Zarbo first approaches them in that hotel lobby scene, Crockett almost blows it by calling him by name by Zarbo, which he shouldn't know his name at this point.
Yeah, and Zarbo even calls him out on it, right? He's like, "How do you know my name?"
Yeah.
And Crockett says, it's one of the perks of being a hotel security. What?
So I'm curious, can they legally search Zarbo's car like that? Like,
No.
Can they use anything from that at all?
No, that's the other thing here, and that's what confuses me the most. Like, does our crime fighting duo never learn a lesson about what's admissible in court? Because she tosses Tubbs the keys, and Tubbs gets this like real shit-eating grin on his face, and they go to look at the car, but like, there's no warrant. They just got a prostitute that stole his keys, and they're going to go look around in the car. If they find anything, like they end up finding those burglar tools, right? And they use that in court. It's like, well, how did you know those burglar tools are going to be there? It's like, oh, this hooker named Candy gave us the Zarbo's car keys after fucking him, and then we went to investigate his car.
Yes, they broke multiple laws. They pimped out a prostitute who then stole the keys. Like, there's no possible way they can argue that would be admissible.
So apparently they just never learn. They never learn what is real evidence and what evidence isn't allowed.
Right.
Thank God they're in Florida.
Anything goes in Florida.
Yeah, anywhere else in the country, they would never, and they would never have an arrest stick.
No, but in a state where even the court reporter is packing, as we learned in the pilot episode, basically anything goes. After a brief investigation in their car where they see a burglar set and a bill for a motel called Pine Hollow, I believe is what it was called. When they're walking back after seeing like, okay, they're starting to put together, this is what Zarbo's going to do. Like it's like sealed. Like they know like, okay, Zarbo's plan is to break into the vault and steal. As they're walking back.
And we come to, and this is where we come to the most awkward and strange conversation of the entire episode.
Yeah. So
just like an informal meeting.
As they're walking back, Zarbo is there waiting. And they're caught off guard. Zarbo and his Thai friend are both there waiting. And Zarbo's like, hey, so did you have a good time looking through my car? So they're like, no, we're getting out of here. And they try and leave. It's like, no, you're coming with us. We have someone that we want you to talk to. They walk out in front of, or somewhere else outside of the hotel. And there waiting is Ross. Ross is one of the dirty police officers that was picked up from the deal with Candy earlier in the episode. And Ross is pissed. And Ross has a good reason to suspect Tubbs and Crockett. He still doesn't know that they're cops, which is mysterious, as you mentioned earlier, Sean. They're all kind of cops, and maybe he would know or be able to find out if the other people were cops. But Ross just says, hey, this Candy, when I talked to Candy, who works for you, when I talked to her, the next thing I knew, I was going down. So either Tubbs and Crockett are cops or they ratted me out. And before it escalates too far, he says, no, it was me that ratted you out. It wasn't these cops. It wasn't Tubbs or Crockett, which is interesting why Candy is even covering for them. She's like the nicest prostitute ever.
I know.
Yeah, it's weird.
When Ross hears that, he and Candy steps forward, he slaps Candy. And this is when things get great in this scene. Crockett then lunges forward and decks Ross, and Ross goes down. The camera shows Ross going down, then repositions over, and you see Tubbs has gone down on like one knee over Ross, and he reaches back like the pimp he is in this episode and bitch slaps the fuck out of Ross.
He gets front and back. I'm gonna slap you and then
Does Tubbs need to choke a bitch? He goes at him with his pimp hand.
It's the most pumped I've ever been for Tubbs, like in any of the previous episodes.
He's not wearing his. Ross is just lucky he's not wearing his rings.
Yeah. I had to pause, get up, and walk around like, oh my God, Ross is dead from a bitch slap. He just knocked the stupid right out of him. And that's essentially what happened, because Ross stands up and stops arguing. He doesn't say shit after that. So the duo's like, hey, fuck you guys, to Zarbo. We're not doing business with you anymore. We're out of here. And Zarbo then, seeing how Tubbs and Crockett react.
Maybe that's why Candy's so loyal, is because Tubbs and Crockett are the best pimps she ever had. True. As they all start walking away, Zarbo stops them like, hey, look, I got you guys wrong. I was just doing my homework on you guys, just like you did on me. It looks like you guys are on the up and up. We are going to hit safety deposit boxes, and we're going to steal everything from every single box.
That was a quality bitch slap. Clearly, you're on my level.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it goes from your snitches or possibly cops to, hey, buddy, real quick after that.
And while they're talking, you can see Ross way in the background where they had walked away from him, and he's standing there like the fat ex-girlfriend that just got her man poached by the prom queen.
Oh yeah, all so sad, kind of looking over his shoulder at him.
What happens to Garcia? Because like they interact at several points with Ross, with Ross the cop guy. But what happens to Garcia, the other guy?
I don't know. We never see him again, at least in this episode. Because
later on they'll confront Ross again, but we have yet to see. So were they just like not really part of this at all?
No, Ross. It turns out in this theft that Ross and Garcia are not involved. It turns out to be that's a totally separate storyline that we need closure on later.
Recap. Let's just recap. So we have PCP guys. So we have drugs in the hotel, and then we go to prostitution in the hotel, and now we are to our third storyline in robbery. Be prepared because we're going to take another switch soon.
Yes. So, and we're coming to another great part of the episode. Zarbo says, like, hey, and I'll just wrap this scene up because the scene ends where it doesn't make any sense, where Tubbs and Crockett should have known there's something up here. Zarbo says, hey, we'll split it 60-40. All we need help on is distracting the security guard. That way we can get in there. Crockett asks him, like, or Tubbs asks him, like, hey, why do you need us? Like, you clearly have enough set up around here that you can get by. So he says, like, I just like to have protection. It should have been obvious to Tubbs and Crockett that they only needed him for one reason, and they were going to steal stuff and get out of there without giving anything to Tubbs and Crockett. But like they get greedy sometimes in these busts. There's a brief stopover at the precinct before we head back to the vault, where the duo is telling Castillo, like, yeah, okay, here's what's going down. We're gonna go through with this. He's gonna punch every single box and steal everything. We're getting a 60-40 split. Castillo's like, we should let it go down. That way, when we arrest Zarbo, lots of things, quote unquote, fall out in these types of busts. So they're getting kind of greedy and seeing that there's an opportunity for all these vaults to get emptied, and then they can start to look for evidence in other crimes.
Is that what he means by it's in the jar?
I think so.
I can't figure out what that meant. That was very odd. Like the last thing he says to Castillo, he looks at him very serious, goes, it's in the jar. Is that a popular saying? Is that colloquialism that I don't know?
I guess so. I mean, maybe then we have heard other great things like fave raves, like in the Little Prince episode. So maybe there's something we don't know about from the mid 80s.
Crockett's just on fire. First the kiss me and make it a love story thing, and now it's in the jar.
We go back to the vault, and this is the time where Zarbo and his Thai friend, well, it's only his Thai friend. I don't know what to call this guy because we never get his name. He never talked.
It doesn't matter. Free tours of our hotel vault. Just stop at just ask for Crockett at the front desk.
Yeah, that's what's happening is that Tubbs and Crockett are distracting the security guard about some paperwork on a clipboard while this Thai gentleman wanders around inside the vault looking at all of the open security. There's an electrical panel open with a board inside of this shows how everything is wired together.
And it keeps showing, it keeps flashing to the security camera, which is recording all of this, which is very confusing because if it's supposed to be, if they're casing it for a heist, would they not want to be on the security footage?
The camera's like panning back and forth, so we have the early 80s security where as long as he walks in the right direction, you'll never actually be able to see his face, right? Instead of like fisheye lenses like what we have now, where it would probably be able to see that whole room. So now we get to this part where we jump back and forth, and this is great. This is fantastic, especially because of how many movies we watch that have karate in them.
Oh yeah.
So we jump back and forth. We're at the vault, and let me back up. We start off at the Pine Hollow Motel, and we see Zarbo and his Thai friend are unloading from a bag. We jump back
No, you got it right first. First, we start out with the vault with them showing that it was robbed without them knowing. Because there's that detective there that's basically telling Crockett he's a moron.
Yeah, okay.
And then it jumps to the hotel.
I remember now how this goes. So first we see the scene where the Thai guy, I don't know, I feel awkward talking about it, but I don't know his name. He goes up to the security panels using that computer with like a sandwich inside a plexiglass up to the keypad, and it's hacking the keypad's numbers to get in. So then we go to Crockett, hours later, who's on the floor, and you see every single lockbox has been opened up, and they didn't take everything. They only took specific things that they don't know what it is, but it's happened where they didn't catch it. They got everything they needed out of Crockett in that meeting just before, where he was able to look around and see all the security. We jump over to the Pine Hollow Motel, and we see that they're unloading some stuff. We see Zarbo and his friend unloading stuff out of a bag, and there's a knock on the door. We go back to the vault, and that's where we have their forensics buddy. He's telling Crockett, like, yeah, you guys been had, and it's not the first time. And I'm like, you need some aloe for that burn.
Yeah, dude, the robbery detective is sitting there basically telling Crockett, yeah, you're a moron. They got you coming and going.
Yeah. Then we go back to the Pine Hollow Motel, and when they open up the door on the other side of the door gets kicked in, right?
Ninjas!
on the other side of the door is a ninja, but instead of doing ninja stuff, he pulls out a gun and we see the gunshot in the scene. We don't know what happens to Zarbo and his friend after that.
So we have now come full circle to we have now gone all the way from pancakes to ninjas.
I mean, that is a story arc I can get behind, okay?
Last scene at the vault is Zito and Zwitek come walking in, and they're like downtrodden because they had just come from the scene where Zarbo and his friend had been murdered, and they tell Tubbs and Crockett and Castillo that all the loot, whatever they had gotten out of those lockboxes, is gone, and that the Thai gentleman, before he died, he mentioned that they were after papers, but you get the sense like their bodies had been mutilated. They were in bad shape when they found them there.
Right.
So this is where I want to talk about Zwitek's watch. So you get kind of a close up Zwitek standing there, and you can really see he's got this really nice gold watch on, like a Rolex. And so I was very distracted this whole scene because all I'm thinking about is they just came from the scene, the guys who just robbed the lockboxes, and suddenly he's wearing like a really, really expensive watch. I'm just wondering, is Zwitek dirty, you think?
It's hard to say that any of them are clean. Right?
I think they're all skimming off the top of all this stuff. Like, that just seems to be, yeah.
Because all these cops have an abundant amount of Rolexes and Ferraris. It's got to be good working vice.
The only one I feel like I can confidently claim that is probably clean is Trudy. She's the only one that seems like she's always on the up and up, looking out for everyone's best interest, and actually does probably the best behind the scenes police work out of all of them too.
Oh, absolutely. Like, everyone goes to Trudy when they need to actually get shit done.
Of course, they decide the next thing that they're going to do is they're going to go to Ross's house. They're going to go bust down Ross because that's the only other person that seems to be involved in this. So if Zarbo and his friend have been murdered and all the boxes have been broken into, they've met Ross on the street, so he must be involved somehow. So they go to see him. When we go to Ross's house, he is packing up as fast as he can. He's trying to run out of there. So the duo and the B team both show up to bring Ross down. He still didn't know that they were cops, so he's surprised when he sees that they are. And he tells them, it's like, he was never working for them. His deal, or he was, but it wasn't like he was deeply involved. His role was only to help them get out of the country after it had been done. When they didn't show up at the airport, that way he could get them out of there, or their meeting point, wherever it was, he went to their house and he saw that they had been murdered. And again, we get confirmation that the bodies were in bad shape when they got there. The bodies had been mutilated. And Ross says, I would never kill anyone like that, to suggest that A, their bodies were badly mutilated, and B, Ross has probably killed someone for his crimes.
So we jumped ahead to, and I love this part in there, the lieutenant talking. Is he talking to Zwitek and Zito?
They're all in the room together. So the duo and the B team are all there with Castillo, and they're kind of running through the evidence.
And at the very end, he mentions, oh yeah, it was a Thai guy. And Lieutenant snaps, Thai? You never said he was Thai.
Yeah, and that's what, and Zwitek that brings that up. Like, Zwitek says, like, yeah, he was, his tongue had been cut in a certain way. It was cut in a tie. It was cut like a tie, I think is what he says.
Yeah, and so it's pretty much like, you never said he was left-handed. That breaks the whole case. That changes everything.
And Castillo does. He flips out. He's like, what? And he just goes storming out of the room. And they go from there to the morgue, where they can go see the bodies. And this is where we get a explanation from Castillo, where, like we mentioned in the beginning, like, we are nowhere near where we started this episode. They go into the morgue.
No, it becomes a total Castillo episode at this point. Like you could pick up from here and it would be as though it was a brand new episode.
And Castillo instantly knows that they are looking for something specific, but he doesn't immediately share it with us. So I'm assuming that what they took from the vault was like General Lao's spicy chicken recipe or something. And that's how this works into, because the very next thing we do is we start visiting every Thai restaurant in the entire city.
Castillo gives a rundown that he worked in, sorry, that's a little bit later where we find out what it is, but he just says, like, this is the work of someone named General Lao Li, who's the biggest runner of opium. He's Chinese, but he lives in Thailand, and he's the biggest opium exporter in the Golden Triangle. Normally it goes out of Toronto, but he must have shifted his port to now Miami. So this is totally out of left field, and it's delivered in a Castillo way, where there's long pauses and just close-ups on those glaring eyes that he has as he tells these stories.
We have gone from drugs to prostitution to robbery to now extortion, I believe is the motive we're looking at now.
And drugs, as far as we know from Castillo at this point, it's drugs. He thinks that General Lao Li is now running his opium or heroin through Miami. Before the scene ends, though, we have a great moment between Tubbs and Crockett. Castillo leaves the morgue after looking at the body of the Thai person who had been mutilated. And Tubbs turns to Crockett and says, "Castillo's strange, isn't he?" Like, finally, one of them admits it, that Castillo is a weirdo.
It was nice to hear that, because he's so fucking weird. Just like walks in and he's all quiet.
It was also nice they finally got the it's personal out of the way. Because they have to say that in every episode. They have to say it's personal for at least someone on the team.
This seems exceptionally personal for Castillo, right? But we still don't have any groundwork on why it's personal. We're not going to find that out until basically the last scene of this episode.
Yes.
So
let's get back to touring the Thai restaurants of Miami.
Yeah, so now they're going to go out looking for illegal immigrants in the Miami area, because they're going to have information, because General Lao Li probably brought them in. So they split up. Crockett's on its own while Tubbs goes with Castillo, and they start hitting every Thai food restaurant in Miami. It's the very last stop. Tubbs and Castillo are going into a restaurant, and
I would hope they would be sick of Thai food by this point.
I would hope so, but they still sit down like they're going to eat. They go to sit down, they walk in, and a waitress comes up and asks them if they're just two for dinner, and Castillo busts out speaking Thai. He just starts talking to her in Thai, which you would think that may have come up in one of the earlier restaurants they went to, but for some reason it came up now.
Nope.
Yes, and
Castillo's
this is when Castillo lets us in that he is former DEA stationed between Burma and Thailand.
Yeah, he worked there for 3 years undercover in between Burma and Thailand, and you get the sense when he's describing it, like, yeah, we may not ever know more information about this, because it's pretty messed up on what he had to do out there.
Clearly, it was some Black Ops type stuff. But surprised that Castillo is the guy they would choose to work in Thailand. But I guess he speaks the language.
You won't be surprised for long, because he pulls out some sick ninja moves later on.
No, he's kung fu.
While they're sitting there, they're looking for a person who's going to be actually named Boof Pratek, I think is how he pronounces his last name. They're seeing if he's there. While they're sitting there, that guy Boone comes walking up and gives them, I think it's just water is what he gives them, but he's like wearing a button-up shirt, totally unbuttoned, with all of his gang tattoos showing. Castillo, who's got Boone's immigration ID in his hand, looks at Boone's like, okay, this is the same guy. He tells Tubbs to go watch the back door and reminds Tubbs, like, hey, you need to go watch this back door and don't forget who we're dealing with, and if you forget, remember the corpse that we looked at. Tubbs looks at Castillo, kind of looks down for a moment as if he's remembering the body, and then gets up and goes and walks to the back door to go guard the back door.
So this is very unfortunate for Tubbs, because he had a high moment in this episode, bitch slapping rocks. And we go from that to him getting his ass kicked by this ninja as the ninja is escaping the restaurant.
Castillo gets up and he starts to slowly walk towards where Boone was going, which is into the kitchen. And of course, it's Castillo, so everything is super uncomfortable. He slowly follows Boone into the kitchen. He opens up the kitchen door and goes in. Everyone inside of the kitchen stops and just stares at Castillo. And we have this like 30-second pause of Castillo just staring at the staff inside of the kitchen. So we have that Castillo stare. He's just awkwardly standing in the kitchen with his back to the door, looking at everyone that's inside of the kitchen. After like 40 seconds, Boone throws a knife at him, and Castillo backs out of the way, and Boone runs off. And Castillo just like RoboCop walks after Boone as he runs out the back door.
Let me just point out that is not a knife made for chopping. I don't even know what it's doing in that kitchen.
And then, so Boone heads out the back door, and Tubbs is waiting there like he's supposed to be. But Boone makes quick work of Tubbs and just beats the fuck out of him before he runs off. Tubbs never stood a chance.
No, he never stood a chance against this ninja. This just builds up to the very next scene, I guess.
Castillo comes running out. He tells Tubbs, like, hey, go cut him off. Go run around the front and go cut him off. Castillo's going to chase Boone while Tubbs goes around the other way. When Tubbs comes around the front, Crockett finally pulls up in his Ferrari. Tubbs just yells to him, like, go this way. We're cutting him off. Castillo's giving chase. So they run off in one direction. We get the scene where Castillo is chasing Boone as they run through the alleys behind all the restaurants and businesses. Eventually, Boone corners himself at the end of an alley with Castillo right behind him.
And
Boone,
then it's Mortal Kombat.
yeah. Boone thinks for a second, jumps off the wall and attacks Castillo. And we see that not only did Castillo work as DEA in between Burma and Thailand, not only does he speak Thai, but he's got some sweet kung fu moves too.
He's Jason frickin' Bourne.
It's so perfect.
I'm telling you, man, Castillo is kung fu. When he retires from being a cop, he's just gonna wander the earth, using kung fu to help people.
I mean, there's a little bit of a fight, but Castillo really just lays the beat down on Boone right there in the alleyway.
He'll die from autoerotic asphyxiation.
While he's giving the beat down, Tubbs and Crockett come pulling up. Well, Tubbs is still running, and then Crockett drives up. They both arrive at the same time, but they're just watching in awe as Castillo is just laying an ass whooping on Boone.
And then my favorite part of the scene, as the guy is laying knocked out on the ground, and everyone's kind of patting Castillo on the back. Castillo turns around. Oh no, he's swallowing his tongue to kill himself.
Right. How the hell does that work?
I don't know. I've been trying for hours.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible. I don't know. I mean, it's just maybe he's biting off his tongue in pieces and trying to choke on them. It doesn't seem like it would be an easy task. I don't know,
but at this point, Boone's dead, so they've lost their contact. And so in the final scene that we get is we go back to the precinct. The duo's there with Castillo, and Castillo is telling them. So there's the B team dump out some contents like, hey, this is everything we got from Ross. There's no papers here. And Castillo, just staring out into nowhere, says, this is General Lao Lee's work. He's not running drugs anymore. He's running papers. And those papers, documents for getting people into the U.S. They're illegal documents for smuggling people into Miami. And
so allow me to recap. Starting with drugs, then prostitution, then robbery, then extortion drugs again. Now, human trafficking.
Yeah, we are nowhere near. Now we're talking about people in a totally different country. We're nowhere near where we started. And this is where we have the huge cliffhanger to bring us back for the second episode. And I freaked out when I saw this. Zwitek mentions that a messenger had dropped off a picture earlier in the morning. They pan around to show you the picture, like, oh, she's kind of the B team and Tubbs are like, hey, she's kind of attractive. And Castillo goes, yeah, that's my wife.
So how did General Lau know that Castillo had a mail order bride?
I don't know, but the pictures is of her at the Miami airport.
I think that the only possible thing is that she's General Lao Lee's daughter, and he while working with the DA, fell in love with her, and it's gonna be this whole fucking thing. It's so good. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to watch
the spicy chicken recipe. Okay, it's all starting to make sense now.
I mean, it ends so great that Castillo has a link in all this. He says that he's not smuggling drugs anymore, that Lee is smuggling in people, that they're doing it through Miami because of some sort of personal event, that General Lao Lee is already in the U.S., and now that Castillo's estranged Thai wife has now been smuggled into the U.S. as well, and as a part of this is huge.
So good.
And after going all the way from the beginning to the end of the episode with all the changes and everything, this is only the first half of this episode, meaning we might have a whole ton of murder, rape, larceny, whatever crimes they've missed in this one might end up in this next one.
Luckily, I love these two-part episodes, and so I'm very excited for the next one. Let's move on from this episode and talk about there's very little music in this episode, so let's get on over there and talk about the music. All right, John, it seems like there's very slim pickings here on the music, and especially since one of them is a cover song. So what do you got for us this week in music?
Well, yeah, one of them is a cover song. The only song, Great Balls of Fire cover by Dolly Parton.
That is a weird combination.
It is. And, to be honest with you, there were so many different directions I could have gone with the segment this week, because Great Balls of Fire, being the 1957 Jerry Lee Lewis song, is kind of a really popular, iconic song amongst media, pop culture. And then you have Dolly Parton, who is Country Hall of Famer, former child star who has like 300 albums. So there was so many different directions. So, I mean, this version is Dolly Parton's 1979 cover off the same titled album. It was her 21st album, by the way. So I started looking more, and what I found is that the original song reached number 2 on the pop charts, number 3 on the R&B charts, and number 1 on the UK chart when it first came out. It was originally written by Otis Blackwell and Jack Hammer, which is an awesome name.
Oh, that's weird. That's weird that it was written by someone named Jack Hammer, and meanwhile all the music for Miami Vice, like all the theme songs and stuff, is done by a man named Jan Hammer.
And I don't think that's a coincidence, because apparently Otis Blackwell and Jack Hammer are famous songwriters. Otis Blackwell in particular, who was a pianist and songwriter who not only co-wrote Great Balls of Fire, but also a number of songs, including Elvis's All Shook Up. So more about with Great Balls of Fire too. I mean, like I said, that song has just been used all over the place. It has been covered by artists that range from the Kingsmen to Aerosmith to Electric Light Orchestra to Misfits to Ronnie James Dio, Garth Brooks, and yes, even Alvin and the Chipmunks. And once again, we see why is in a Miami Vice episode, because they are huge fans of Alvin and the Chipmunks.
I gotta tell you, John, I looked up and listened to their cover of Legs, and I've never felt more dirty in my entire life. It's so creepy.
If it's in Miami Vice, Alvin and the Chipmunks did it. So there was even a Spanish version of Great Balls of Fire by a band called Onda Vaselina, or as the kids call them, OV7, in which it is in the songs called Grandes Luces del Fuego, released in 1989. Don't kill me on the pronunciation on that.
No, you're okay.
Listeners.
You're okay. We got the sense.
So, and it has been performed not just by many artists, but by actors and characters on TV as well, being performed by Scott Bakula in an episode of Quantum Leap entitled Miss Deep South. It was performed by Anthony Edwards, aka Goose, in Top Gun. We all remember that.
What?
Mm-hmm.
It was also performed by Dennis Quaid in the biopic of Jerry Lee Lewis entitled Great Balls of Fire. And not to mention, last but not least, Seamus from Family Guy performing it in an episode of Family Guy as well. So that is pretty much all I wanted to talk about with the music, is that Great Balls of Fire is just everywhere, and there's just way too many things to talk about. I couldn't focus on any specific one. Downloading some La Onda Vaselina.
Well, and it could have easily gone the other way, right? Because there's just as much information about Dolly Parton as there is about Great Balls of Fire. So, although I'm interested to make a compilation CD of Alvin and Chipmunks do Miami Vice and just have a whole album of that.
Yes, yeah, I'm telling you, and I think at this point, I'm seeing their names enough through my research that we would have enough songs. We could do a whole album. We might even be able to do a 2 CD compilation.
Let's head on to our final thoughts to this episode. All right, guys, I'll kick off this week. I'm going to make mine short, too, because, we've gone on a little bit longer for this episode because there was so many twists and turns inside of this episode. What I find amazing in this episode of Miami Vice is that we hit another note of, what's considered to be the classic storyline for a police drama. And I'm starting to wondering now, how does this show make it 5 seasons? They are doing every single stereotype police drama storyline. It's like rapid fire, them just shooting them out as fast as they can. I don't know how they're going to string this out into 5 seasons. It seems like we are hitting every single story that has ever been made, including this one where we have this story covers everything. We have PCP, which was obviously a deal in the 70s and the 80s. That was a hot button topic. We have dirty cops. We have prostitution. We have prostitutes wearing wires. We have our crime fighting friends turning into pimps. And then it brings in ninjas and General Lee and Castillo being a DEA agent working undercover. This episode is turning into a missing in action movie. So I don't know how they continue to make seasons after we're only in the 14th episode of the first season. I don't know how they have any more stories to go 5 more seasons.
And seeing that leads to my breakdown as I'm watching it from a different view. Watching as many TV shows, in particularly cop dramas and stuff that I do, this is very common. In the point of where we're at in the first season, being 14 episodes deep, getting toward the end of the first season. And this is when TV shows typically start to get really, especially in their first season, really nervous that they're going to get canceled. And so they just start throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the viewer. As many plot twists. This is you meet someone's long lost twin brother shows up in the show, you know. This is the best TV as far as these TV shows. This is really what makes or breaks them as far as getting them renewed or canceled. I think we're seeing that. They're all over the damn place plot-wise, but it is so much more interesting now because there is just everything. There's ninjas, there's drugs, there's prostitutes. It's just Wild West.
True, a lot of that makes sense too. Like when I think about shows that I've watched, except for the trend that we're in now where everything goes to streaming and then you can just binge watch it. But when you think of pre-2015 TV, that seems to fit, you know, somewhere in the last third of the first season that they just get desperate.
Yeah, you'd see them a lot where at the beginning, you know, they're trying to be clever and kind of slow walk you into whatever the show was about in their first season. But you would commonly see, like, if they weren't getting the ratings they were supposed to by the second half of the season, they would pull all the stuffs out because a lot of these shows were so scared that they were going to be canceled.
Jenna, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
I loved this episode. I thought it was great. I mean, I've loved a number of episodes so far, but this one had an incredibly strong open, and the episode itself was really strong, which for me, it's been like one or the other. So having it be sort of very strong throughout, and even though it was super chaotic, I loved that. Like, it adds to, I guess, some of the ridiculousness of Miami Vice, which is kind of what I'm looking for, right? Like, I'm not necessarily looking for it to be like a feels episode every time, or like something that I really want to dig deep into. I expect it to be a little bit of like a ridiculous cop drama that I just by it being dated alone, I can have fun with. And that's exactly what this episode gave me, was like those crazy, very like cheesy, and the fact that there was just so much story fit into this. This is how many times have they had 2-part episodes and we're only in the first season? So they clearly need to like figure out how to write episodes that fit into one episode, so you don't have to keep doing these like 2-parters. But I think one thing that they have proven so far, as we're well into season 1, is that they're totally capable of throwing in all these crazy twists and turns. So, I mean, it makes more sense the further that we go why they were able to last a few seasons, is because they're so like batshit crazy and off the wall about everything that they're doing that they're just gonna like throw stuff. Like, clearly they've just got plot points on like a dartboard somewhere that they just keep mixing and matching every week, and I think that it's great. I don't know, I liked it.
Yeah, and one thing that I keep wondering about with this episode is, like Dominic said, the guy who wrote it, this is the only episode they let him write. And so it makes me wonder, like, here we are talking about how awesome, like how much we enjoyed this episode. I wonder if you go back and look at the ratings at the time, if people didn't like this episode because of how all over the place it was. Yeah. I wonder if it got the exact opposite response, you know, because this is the only episode they let him write. So, and it's a 2-part episode, which is even more surprising that he didn't at least get to write the second half.
Yeah, that's really weird to me that he didn't write for both parts.
True. Well, the only thing that I think about at the end of this episode is if you were watching this show when it first came out in 1985 and you missed this episode, you're screwed, because part 2 is probably going to make 0 sense unless you saw this episode. And there's no such thing as Netflix or Amazon, so you weren't able to go back and see how this storyline started until over a year later when it was shown in syndication.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is just insane. Like, I can't imagine what that would be like now, because I think that would, watching everything on streaming and stuff, if I miss an episode, I'll stop watching a series until I can go back, and watch that episode and watch everything in order. Dude, if that happened to me back then, like, that would be the end of Miami Vice for me, because it's like, well, now I gotta wait a year to finally see what happens before I can move on.
Yeah, and there'd be a whole new season starting. So, okay, well, that's going to do it for us this week with Go With The Heat, your cultural guide to the phenomenon that was Miami Vice. This was season 1, episode 14, titled Golden Triangle, aka Score. I cannot wait for next week to talk about the second part of this episode. Be sure to subscribe, check out our website, gowiththeheat.com. Email us. We'd love to hear your feedback or hear any information you may have or would like us to talk about on Miami Vice. You can email us at gowiththeheat@gmail.com. You can get all 3 of us on Twitter, and you can find out the show on Twitter. Just go to gowiththeheat.com/subscribe. You can find all the links and the information you need for that. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you all next week.
Bye, pals.
See you later.